the Museum Services Program at the Texas Historical Commission. Welcome to the next podcast in our Training for Texas Museums series. The project is funded in part by a generous grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. In our last podcast, we talked to you about the importance of preparing for emergencies of all kinds. We highlighted the resources that are inexpensive yet very effective for helping small museums prepare for these emergencies. We've also just wrapped up a series of one-day workshops on the topic as well. Coordinated in partnership with the Texas Association of Museums, we offered the trainings in 11 locations throughout the state during the summer of 2009. Our trainer for that workshop was Rebecca Elder. Rebecca is a conservator, and she's the adjunct preservation field services officer for Amigos Library Services. Participants in those workshops learned a lot of really important tips and ideas for planning, but perhaps the most popular exercise during those workshops were the salvage demonstrations. And Rebecca was kind enough to join us today in our offices to go through those demonstrations once more, so that in case you missed the original workshops or in case you just want a refresher, you can pull them up on the web. Now, your museum collections might get wet for a number of different reasons. Really, it's just a matter of time before an emergency happens in your own institution. And you're going to have precious little time to get those things drying before you have an even bigger problem with mold and mildew. Now, we recommend that every museum set aside some time annually to set up their own mock disaster and salvage exercise. It's really important for your staff and your volunteers to get some experience handling wet collection objects. And that's because wet things behave a lot differently than they do when they're dry. And so it's really good for your team to get some experience before you have to respond to an actual real emergency. Now, of course, you're not going to use your actual museum collection for this exercise. You'll want to go out and scour the local thrift shops, garage sales, or maybe you have some things in your attic or your basement. You want some things that closely resemble the objects that you have in your museum collection. Now, our demonstration today is going to be very tidy. We have clean tap water that we've soaked our objects in, and we've got just a handful of things, whereas you'll likely be dealing with dozens, if not hundreds, of objects in a real emergency. And of course, our water is nice and clean, and yours is probably going to be a little dirtier, maybe a lot dirtier, so you'll want to make sure that you're following the safety precautions necessary to deal with that. And if you have any questions about what those safety precautions might be, you can contact us here at our office, and we'd be happy to help you. So I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca, and she's going to demonstrate how to salvage textiles, things like costumes and quilts that might have gotten wet. Rebecca?
Thanks, Carlin. First, I want to show you some of the things you'll need when you're salvaging textiles. You'll need lots and lots of sheets, towels, something that you can use to absorb water. So I'm going to use just some inexpensive white hand towels that we bought at the local variety store. The other thing you need is some way to support your textiles, because wet textiles get very heavy, and one of the biggest dangers with them is that they're so heavy that the weight of the water will tear the fragile fibers of the textile. So we want to use something to support anything wet when we're carrying it around. We're going to be using Reemay, which is spelled R-E-E-M-A-Y. It's a conservation grade non-woven fabric. In a pinch, though, if you have an emergency and you need to get some very quickly, you can go to the fabric store and buy Pellon interfacing. Just make sure whatever you do, you don't get the kind that has adhesive on it so that you can iron it on. Buy the sew-in kind. So let's go ahead and get started. Carlin, if you can help me for a minute. Carlin's going to help me for a minute. Moving textiles is a lot of the time it's a two-person job. So Carlin's going to hold my piece of Reemay, and I'm going to just pick up my little textile today and let it drain in my hands for a while, and then I'm going to pick that up. You can hold that over the water so it can drain. But the reason it's important to put the textile on some kind of a support is that that's what it's going to carry all the weight of the textile now. Okay, I think that's drained out. So I'm just going to let it be for a moment, and I'm going to make myself a work surface with some towels. One of the considerations with textiles is, of course, that they can get very big. You're probably going to need lots of workspace. You can do this outside if you need to, on the ground. Just make sure you spread a large area with towels to keep everything protected from the ground. So we're going to just put everything out and carefully try to reshape our garment to an approximation of the correct shape. I think it's important to say that when we're doing salvage, the goal for immediate salvage isn't to make everything perfect right away. It's that we're just trying to get everything safe and protect it from mold growth. So if it's not perfect, because you probably don't have 2 hours to get this to perfect shape, that's okay. We're just trying to approximate it. Then I'm going to take more towels and gently blot. I'm not pressing down really hard. And then blot again. And as your towels get wet, you can just keep reusing new towels and new towels and new towels. So I'm going to do this one more time. And I'm in the middle of a big disaster. I don't have time to sit and blot forever. So now that I've got the worst of the water out, I'm going to cover it up with towels to protect it from light damage and to help water wick out of it, and walk away and work on my next item. Once I've gotten through everything, I'll probably come back and reblot and change out my towels to keep everything moving along. And that's the basics of salvage for textiles.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. We're going to do 2 more short podcasts where Rebecca will show us how to salvage wet books and paper, some paintings, and some other artifacts that you might have in your museum collection. But we'll wrap this one up for now. And as always, if you have any questions about what you've seen today or about emergency planning in general, make sure you contact us at our offices in the Museum Services Program at the Texas Historical Commission. We'll see you in a bit.